There are a lot of problems in podcasting to be solved, and you only solve those by asking questions about why stuff didn't work.
Right.
And I think sometimes we get into the thing in most businesses where we're patting ourselves on the back a lot, and maybe we should do less of that and and more problem solving.
NPR is a mission-based organization. We do not have a paywall, which, as you know, for quality journalism is rarer and rarer.
Right.
So the audience gives the brands a halo, we call it, because they are supporting NPR.
Hey, it's E.B. Moss, and this is episode 25 of season 2 of Insider Interviews, where you get the insider scoop on the business of media, marketing, and advertising. And you're going to get a double scoop today. I ran into 2 senior executives in the audio landscape at Podcast Movement in the last week of August. Terrific conference, and first up, you're going to hear from Steve Lickteig. He is the head of audio at CNN, and he focuses on podcasting and making sure that the content from the news is just as compelling as the news itself.
Steve Lickteig, hi.
Hi.
From CNN Audio.
Correct.
Yay. So you are ensuring that, like, all of the good content that comes out of CNN, what we think of perhaps as TV, but is also radio and podcasting, you oversee all of that?
I oversee strictly the podcasting part of CNN.
The man I love. Okay.
CNN it's a massive organization.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bureaus all over the world. I mean, it's the place people turn to when news breaks. Our programming is new. There's news, but we have lots of different shows, from newsy or podcasts to like Anderson Cooper dealing with grief.
Yeah.
All there
and
is.
That's a very good show, by the way.
Thank you. It's all him. He's thrown himself into it. He gives every ounce of himself to the interviews, and it's been a really big success for us.
And just as a sidebar, I think that is one of the differentiators of podcasting, is when the host injects such a personal aspect. It is such a personal medium for us. We're opting in to listen, and Anderson Cooper, as you said, it's like no holds barred in terms
Correct.
of what he shares.
It's the secret sauce to almost every show, right?
Yeah.
Is your host has to be invested. And there are people who get into podcasts or want to have a podcast, and if they don't understand that part of the equation, it's not going to be a success.
Yeah, agree. Understanding equations is also part of your secret sauce, because I think that you're specializing in the podcasting aspect of CNN, but you really have to be all things to all people to make that happen. What's a day in your life like, Steve?
It'll be a mix of editorial, either listening to shows and giving notes, conceiving of new shows or new ideas within shows.
Oh.
Like doing different kinds of episodes, helping the teams figure that out, meeting with the business side of the organization. So our ad sales team, our marketing teams, talking with them about our shows that are coming up, how they can best be promoted, how they maybe could be sold. I have to be knowledgeable of that whole space.
Yeah.
I can't just be editorial. The left hand has to know what the right hand is doing at all times. And then my job is to sort of convey all that information back to my team. And so one thing I just firmly believe in is that producers should not be blocked out of how things work. Not just like how they make a show. There's this is how you mix this episode, or how
right.
It's knowing, okay, you made this episode, now we're going to publish it, and here's the download numbers, here's the marketing attached to it, here's whether it worked or not. All that stuff is knowledge that you have to have as a producer in podcasting.
Oof.
And the thing is, a lot of people get into this business in the podcasting side, editorial, and they think that all they need to know is how to make the show.
Yep.
And you got to know everything.
Well, as we said, podcasting is much more personal medium. So you have to have your personal thumbprint on that all and turn it into a product that is saleable,
right,
as well.
Right.
Let's talk about the political landscape for a second. As we record this during the Democratic National Convention week while we're here at Podcast Movement, are there challenges in terms of brands who are concerned about quote unquote safety or suitability, the more appropriate word, since CNN is news coverage, and it's so challenging to draw advertisers in.
I mean, brand safety is always an issue. It's sort of interesting because we see our numbers go up of late around anything election related. So the audience is there, but the advertisers sometimes are like, oh, we don't want to advertise in that because it's about, contentious politics. It's like, well, but that's where the ears are right now.
Yeah.
So that's always a bit of a conundrum. We're not going to change our editorial mission to attract advertisers, I mean, we're going to do what we do and hope that they come.
Yeah.
But we also have other shows like Sanjay Gupta's Chasing Life, which is exactly what it's about. It's like living your best life, understanding the way the health news of the world that's out there now, him going through that and helping people understand it. That's a very friendly show to advertisers, right? And, we really don't I guess we do controversial topics only because that news is controversial, right? But we're not out there looking
correct
for things to drum up attention or whatever. We are a news organization and we report the news.
But there's also a balance because news can feel controversial because all of the caca that's going on right now in such a different world. But hats off to you, man, because you also have one of my favorite shows that makes me happy that I listen to, 5 Good Things.
Oh, yeah.
And that optimistic aspect, I think, is something that we all really crave right now to balance the controversy that is our day-to-day.
I'm glad that you mentioned that show. We started that show. We have 5 Things, which is our daily news show of 6 a.m., 9 a.m., noon, 3 and 6. And we were like, this is kind of depressing. I mean, you know what I mean? Like
it's just what's going on.
This is what's going on in the world, and we're telling you what it is. And we're like, is there some way we can utilize this brand of 5 Things and put a positive face on it? 5 Good Things was born. It was like, it made a lot of sense. We launched it in the feed of 5 Things, and now we have pulled it out into its own feed. It's still available in the 5 Things feed, but now it has its own feed. We're trying to build that audience separately.
Yeah.
And we're doing that. Like, we're seeing people going to that feed alone, and that audience is growing. I would say that was a real success story for us.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So this is sort of a 2-parter, but we'll chunk it out. And both has to do with the business side. We've been hearing here, especially again at Podcast Movement, about the issues around ad load, and all due respect to CNN radio and radio in general, we all want to make sure that our precious baby podcasting is not turning into commercial radio with a heavy ad load.
Yeah.
How do you balance that? And then after that, I want to talk about what's in it for the advertiser that's a differentiator.
I do talk with our business team a lot about ad load. We try to keep it low, because just for that reason, we don't want to have...
What's low to you?
So we usually we have a pre-roll, and then we try to keep it at 2 mid-rolls.
Oh, good.
Depends on how long the show is, but sometimes one break will have 2. Sometimes we'll have 2 separate breaks and 1 ad in each. Or sometimes we'll put 2 in one break and 2 in another, so 4 total within the show.
Okay, but you cap it.
Yeah, we're not stacking 4 in a row.
Okay.
I have definitely heard shows that have 4 mid-rolls in a row. And then we have, then we'll do a post-roll. But, so we keep a limit on it. I think only in like special circumstances would it ever go above that. And there may be occasions where you would hear more than that set 2. But that's, again, it's kind of a case-by-case basis. But we really try to be mindful of it, because just for those reasons you stated,
Exactly.
You don't want to sound like you're listening to the FM radio station.
Right. And that kind of leads to my other question is the UX of podcasting. Obviously, we all talk about how, back to the personal, it's in your ears, you're opting in, you feel an affinity for the host that you've selected to listen to, and there's very high trust, very high engagement as a medium. But what about the sort of halo effect for brands who opt in to advertise with you? What's their UX?
Well, I always say that there's nothing more intentional than listening to a podcast. Like, it literally takes you so many steps to do it.
Yeah.
You pull your phone out. You got to find the app.
Yeah.
You got to click on it. You got to go to the show. Like, there's like 6 or 7 clicks. So you are making a very conscious decision to listen to that show.
Right.
It's not just washing over you. So that's the first thing I always tell our biz folks, that's the emphasis to make, is like, people are listening because they want to. So therefore, by default, they're listening to your ads, essentially. I mean, there is always the skip button, which that is what it is.
I know you're fighting against that skip button.
I would love to see a situation where we could have tech that allows some ads to opt in for ads not to be, just like when we stream TV.
That's right. We've enabled the no fast forward button on
I don't know why
CTV.
that can't be something that we could be thinking about in our industry, but you have an intentionality there where people are like, I am listening to the show, and also you're getting a trusted. I mean, particularly with CNN, one thing, if anybody's like fake news, whatever, if people knew the process that those shows and all of our news stories go through before they see the world, they'd be blown away.
Yeah.
Like, we have a whole department of people fact checking, vetting it for mistakes. I mean, it's really incredible. Like, all of our podcasts go through that process before they are published. So you could say to an advertiser, you are getting a well-crafted, journalistically sound show that you can be sure is accurate. And so there is a brand safety there to that extent. Like, we're sort of guaranteed. They may not want to be around the topic, but that topic will be pristine in its presentation. Yeah. So there's that for the advertiser. And then just generally, I think podcast advertising is super, super undervalued.
Yeah.
I think that
our CPM rates really haven't changed in the 10 years I've been in it.
I always say, if I had a business and I had $100,000 ad budget, I'd put it all in podcasting.
We love you, Steve.
Because it's really a malleable thing,
right?
And it's inexpensive to make that podcast ad. Like, it's just someone reading. You know what I mean? Like, there's
right.
And also, what other medium can you think of where you get an ad essentially in isolation? There's no other ads around you. I mean, granted, you have 2 mid-rolls in a row. Yeah. You do, but rarely do I ever watch linear television anymore. But like, there'll be an ad break, and it's just one ad after another that have nothing to do with each other. And it's just like, what am I? This is a barrage of my eyes and brain.
Completely agree.
And then in podcasting, you get this one singular ad with single voice usually that's telling you about this product, and it just makes a lot of sense.
Well, just going back to the accuracy and the great staff that vets everything that comes out of CNN. Full disclosure, my brother was Wolf Blitzer's head writer for 15 years.
Okay.
On the Situation Room.
Amazing.
Yeah, he retired a couple of years ago, and I will never forget watching that episode when Wolf signed off as my brother and said, for the Situation Room, this is Howard Moss.
Amazing.
Isn't that great?
Wolf is a national treasure.
He is a national
frankly.
treasure. Yes. You and I obviously are huge podcast fans. We're audio fans in general. I think you have such a pedigree, having worked at, the Mac Daddy when it launched with Slate. And NPR, you were there for a million years also. But what do you wish for the industry other than a stop the fast forward button?
It's weird to say as an editorial person, but it really is around the advertising. The money-making model is sort of broken. I think that's true for a lot of industries as well. Like TV advertising is sort of broken. And we get caught up in the industry over downloads. Like, that's the big thing. Well, how many downloads you got?
Or listens. We still call them downloads, for Pete's sake.
But really, the value, to my mind, is completion rates. CNN has, on average, our podcasts have about an 84% completion rate.
Excellent.
Which is really, really good. And if I was an advertiser, that's the number I'd want to know.
Yeah.
I'd rather have 5,000 diehard listeners listening to 85% of my show or whatever than 100,000 people who are just like, skipping around, whatever. Like, it's that dedicated audience. And I think what I would like to impart to the decision makers and people in podcasting is, like, don't get hung up on building massive audiences. I don't think that's where the secret sauce is for podcasting. I think it's about really hardcore, dedicated audiences of a smaller size. It's great if you have the daily and you're getting 3 million downloads. That's great. But those days are kind of over, I think. You're not going to build those kinds of audiences anymore. And so you have to sort of set your marker a little lower, and then also help the advertiser understand that it's not just sheer download numbers. We saw the iOS 17 update cause download numbers to drop because we realized, people actually weren't listening. It was being auto-downloaded.
They were just downloading it.
And it level set. And I thought that was very valuable.
Yeah.
To have that knowledge, because we were kind of going on wrong assumptions. And that's not good for advertising. They want to know they're getting accurate numbers. So I guess the thing is, my long and rambly way of getting at it is, we've got to level set the industry and understand that, yes, the audiences may not be as high as you may want them, but the audiences that you have are extremely dedicated, generally.
Right.
And again, goes back to this intentionality of I am choosing to listen to your thing. I had to do all these steps to get to it.
Yeah.
That's a valuable set of ears.
One of the things that I will give a shout out to is Dan Meisner of Bumper, who just came out with sort of a way to aggregate all of the different listener metrics across all of the apps, including YouTube, through verified listeners, so that we understand things like listen length. And that's, I think, what you're talking about is very important. And then engagement, what were the KPIs that were important to the advertiser, the key performance indicators? What was the follow through on that? What were the click-through rates versus the buy rates versus all of that? So we're making progress in measurement. It's still a bit of a free-for-all, but I completely agree that length of listen is rising all boats. And then just to sort of round that out, I love to ask my guests about their definition of brand purpose, whether it's your own personal Steve Lickteig brand or what you try to offer up where brands can align with something that's purpose oriented.
For CNN, its brand is trust. With the advancements of AI, which, by the way, I have had my mind blown many times at this conference around AI tech.
Yeah. That
I'm pretty familiar with it, and I'm seeing stuff that is so advanced that I can hardly get my head around it.
Agreed.
And I was talking to someone about this yesterday, and they said, "Imagine this is the worst it's ever going to be. It's just going to get better."
That's right.
And so when that starts to become no longer a service but a problem, people using audio in ways that are nefarious, the premium is going to be on trust. You know that a news organization like CNN is not going to come out with fake audio. Yeah. We're not going to create something that didn't happen.
AI voice. Yeah.
Correct. And so we may use AI voices to do newsletters, speech to text stuff, but you're never going to get the brand pitch to brands is, don't you want to be associated with something that is trustworthy, that there's no problems there, right?
Why would you cannibalize that?
Right.
Yeah.
So CNN, and I think this commodity will grow. I think people will pay a premium to know that the information they're getting is accurate in the coming years, because you see it every day. Fake videos, AI video that's scary too. You can now just type in to an AI tool that a video you want to see, and it will just create it for you.
Yeah.
And that's going to get scarier and scarier. And so I would pay personally a premium to know that I'm getting my information from a trustworthy source. So that's the brand proposition.
So I thought that would be the last question, but it brings up something about video. We've seen AI video fakes again in our political environment, and I know that there was some talk of withholding one of the most robust tools that enabled AI generated video until after the election.
Yep.
I think that is, like a finger in the dike kind of scenario,
Sure.
And we're already seeing those fakes out there. Talk to me about video podcasting or vodcasting, because we've heard a lot of buzz about the value of YouTube, mostly to drive impressions and perhaps less on the engagement side.
Yeah.
But what's your business model with audio and video podcasting from CNN?
So video is hard for shows that are highly edited, because most video podcasts are two people talking to each other. Like us.
You'll see a lot of jump cuts if I turn this into video.
Right.
Yeah.
And but so that's So that's the appeal of it for folks. They get to see their favorite people just talking, essentially. Shows like The Assignment and Chasing Light, those are very edited. They're crafted. And so that kind of video would be too cumbersome for us to do. You have to have a video editor and an audio editor.
Yeah.
Although there are tools that make both those things much easier now. But
AI.
But we're pulling clips from our podcasts to put out as video, like an excerpt from Audie's show or from Anderson Cooper's show.
Right.
So video is part of our strategy, but we are not there yet where it's just the whole episode on YouTube or wherever. Yeah. It's using key moments from our podcasts as video that we put out on TikTok, Instagram, the CNN website itself, the CNN app.
Right.
That's where we live.
Well, that makes sense. We heard recently that the views of shorts and of clips on TikTok are really quite tremendous. And hopefully it's a good marketing tactic to drive back to listen to the full audio.
Yeah.
I think that our challenge these days is also getting people to click through when they're on one platform, like a video tool, to then listen to it.
It's very hard.
That's our challenge.
That's one thing we do a little bit of. We do on TV. It's like if Audie goes on Jake Tapper's show or whatever it may be. This is old technology, but we're putting QR codes up on the screen.
Yep, brilliant.
And and the thing is, we realized we weren't getting a lot of traction necessarily. We've asked them to make it up for a minute. It used to be up for like 20 seconds.
Yeah.
That's not enough time to get your phone out and to think about it, to register that it's there. And so that we noticed if we put it on longer, we get more engagement back. So it's little things like that can add up. But it is very hard to get people to go from one platform to another. It's like that's the holy grail, right? Can you make that work?
The little concept of the fact that you realized that you had to have a QR code up longer is why, again, you're the man for the job, because you're thinking 360. You've had your thumbprint on so many different areas of building an audio product. So.
Yeah, I have producers I work with that we just sort of sometimes sit down and be like, why didn't that work? And we just ask ourselves a bunch of questions until we're like, oh, yeah, I think it was because it wasn't up long enough, and then we could iterate off of that and experiment. I think podcasting, like most things, but because it's still a new medium, there are a lot of problems in podcasting to be solved. And you only solve those by asking questions about why stuff didn't work.
Right.
And I think sometimes we get into the thing in most businesses where we're patting ourselves on the back a lot. Mm-hmm. And maybe we should do less of that and more problem solving.
We can't rest on our audio laurels.
No.
So, Steve Lickteig, thank you.
Sure, happy to be here.
Head of audio at CNN.
Yep.
Appreciate your time here.
Thank you.
Gina Garrubbo, it's like old home week with you.
Same here. Oh, it's great to see you at maybe our 8th podcast audio conference over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Evie, your reporting on audio has been so valuable to all of us who were really trying to get the attention of the media community, because audio is frankly not as sexy as video to a lot of the brands and agencies, but podcasting and your attention have really helped it.
Oh, coming from you, that means a lot, because you are like the woman in audio. I'm speaking with Gina Garrubbo, and I will explain briefly that you are the president, CEO of NPM, that's National Public Media, which is the sponsorship building arm of NPR and public media, right?
Correct.
Well, I learned that from interviewing you a couple of times, which is why, aside from seeing you at Podcast Movement, that's why it's also Old Home Week for us, and I am your biggest fan.
Feelings mutual.
Thank you. So you had great news last month that you brought to life here at Podcast Movement.
Right.
You're representing This American Life.
This American Life. Ira Glass and Rachel Martin of NPR fame, who has a new podcast, Wildcard, interviewed Ira as the keynote here at Podcast Movement. And they are both so gifted, so hilarious. Rachel, was jeering Ira a bit for editing her while she's trying to do.
He said, hold the mic closer, Rachel. She's like, here he is, producing me.
Right, producing me. And no, we're very proud of that. A lot of the NPR talent was able to come here. It's the first time Podcast Movement was in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, but you also brought the behind-the-scenes folks. You did a Tiny Desk concert at NPR headquarters, right?
We had a Lainey Wilson performed at the Tiny Desk Monday night. And, the Tiny Desk is magical. So much of what NPR does is really thoughtful, serious, fact-based journalism, storytelling, science, politics, history, business, culture. And to have the bright light and the uplifting experience of a Tiny Desk it's just a wonderful thing to have as part of the NPR culture.
In my days working at Media Village, I got to see a Tiny Desk concert. And then, I don't know if you recall this sort of alignment that I have with NPR, but my first boss in television, in cable television, was Jarl Mohn, who is the last retired CEO of NPR.
Yes.
So he was episode 1 of season 2 of Insider Interviews, and I'll link to that in the show notes. So I am such a fan of all things NPR because of great people, and it raises the bar on quality. I mean, talk about some of the podcasts that you're representing.
So, as I said, the genres are expansive. Planet Money is one of the most listened to.
Yep.
NPR News Now is the most listened to podcast. Up First, our daily news podcast, one of the most listened to podcasts. And then, of course, we have Shortwave, which is science, and we have Wait, Don't Tell Me, which is comedy, pop culture, happy hour.
I love that.
It's a broad and wonderful assortment. But I have to tell you, the common thread is that NPR appeals to the curious who want to understand the world around them.
Oh my gosh, and we need so much more of that right now. So on behalf of the world, thank you for doing that. So I do want to talk a little bit, because this is your bailiwick, of how you monetize that. What's it like do you call them an advertiser if they're
We call them sponsors.
Talk to me about your business.
We do not do traditional advertising on NPR. Rather, we produce fact-based messaging that our audience appreciates because we produce it in the voice and tone of NPR. So rather than a commercial interruption, you will hear that NPR's programming is made possible by client X who brings you Y. So it's fact-based, it's clear, it's really tell them, don't sell them. We don't allow a lot of claims or outside voices. We also have a custom audio unit, and we do storytelling at Podcast Up Front. We had the Organic Valley head of marketing talking about how wonderful it was that our production group went onto their farm, and you could hear the sounds of the cows and voices of the farmers. And she said, we always knew what our brand looked like. We never knew what our brand sounded like until we worked with NPM and we're on NPR.
Storytelling for a sponsor. Brilliant. I love that. So it really becomes part of the fabric. And honestly, everything that NPR puts out feels, should I say brand safe, but really trusted. It's that quality content, all of that.
Yes. So our audience has an incredible amount of trust for NPR. 80% of our audience says that they consider NPR personally important to them.
Okay.
We've even done surveys where the NPR audience thinks the sponsors are handpicked, and they find it very respectful and thoughtful that the sponsor messages are produced in the style and tone that they are. And Susan Leland, our director of research, has done many studies, including a Neuro Insights study that shows the way NPR sponsor messages are produced makes them more memorable.
Oh.
23% more memorable than commercial radio ads.
Well.
And I think it was 11% more memorable than a side-by-side comparison with a video ad. And you can see this study on nationalpublicmedia.com under the Insights tab.
Okay. Do you have a quote-unquote ad load?
Yeah, so on the radio, it's teeny compared to commercial. It's, just a few minutes an hour versus 14 or 12 on commercial radio. And podcasting, our load is fairly standard, but we will have only one pre-roll and maybe 2 mid-rolls. So in a lot of shows, you might hear a number of pre-rolls.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I know. That's a pet peeve of mine. That and long intros, which hopefully I didn't do on this. And then the other thing I know from a lot of our podcast industry research is that the audience is really so appreciative of sponsors of podcasting because they perceive that they're helping their favorite shows stay alive. Well, it's like you guys double down on that because they already love your content and then they're loving on the sponsor as well.
Correct.
Yeah?
NPR is a mission-based organization. We do not have a paywall, which, as you know, for quality journalism is rarer and rarer.
Right.
So the audience gives the brands a halo, we call it, because they are supporting NPR. I've worked for the Discovery Channel, a lot of media companies, and the audience likes the programming, likes the network, but never said we appreciate the sponsors the way they do at NPR.
Okay, so you call it halo. I said they're loving on them. And then that obviously is a great brand experience for the sponsor, and so it becomes almost like a flywheel
And we
effect.
can measure that. So we'll do brand lift studies. NPR was one of the first podcast publishers, was definitely the leader in podcasting for years, as you recall, and still is a leader. And so we really paved the way for how to produce podcast sponsorship messaging that was authentic, resonant, memorable, and we have measured all of that.
Yeah. Let's go back to the hot topic of brand suitability. Now, certainly NPR and Up Next and things like that, you cover the news. Is there a concern or challenge by any of the sponsors in aligning with the stuff that's going on in the world right now?
Absolutely. There are a number of brands we work with who don't want to be adjacent to the hard news. We have other brands who will say, I'll be in the financial news, I'll be in this kind of news, but overall, most of the brands we work with are comfortable with NPR news. We do not pit guests against each other. We do not allow a lot of vitriol or combative language. There's a lack of sensationalism. It's easier on our listeners and easier for the brands. The other thing is we don't take political advertising.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of the brands we work with love the fact that their sponsor message is not going to run next to a nasty political ad.
That's such a good point. I didn't realize that. And then in a sort of politically correct way, let's talk about diversity, Gina. You are one of the high-profile women in the industry. Are you feeling like things have changed for female executives, for women in audio, video, etc.? Talk to me about that.
First of all, public media is very inviting. NPR in particular, many thanks to John Lansing, our former CEO, who recently and unexpectedly died. But even before the George Floyd incident and riots and the Me Too movement, John came into NPR saying, I put DEI above everything. I want it to be in the fabric of what we do, from the employees who work at NPR to how we cover stories, to the voices. And I think women, minorities, people with disabilities, all kinds of people have benefited, including women, but all kinds of people.
Well, then I will use another denomination kind of phrase and say NPR is like the mensch of content. You can quote me on that. So if you could change one thing about the podcasting industry, what would it be? What would your wish list be?
Discoverability. So honestly, I am praying that AI will help solve this, because you see it here at Podcast Movement. There's going to be 20 new podcasts that get published this week.
Yeah.
How does the listener find them? Mm-hmm. What is their preferred platform? I'm hoping AI and a technology that we don't know exists yet comes into the ether, and consumers are able to listen to what they want, when they want, how they want, as part of their daily lives in a way that's really not even clear to us right now.
Well, give it 17 days, the way AI is progressing.
Right.
You know, they say that AI will never be as bad as it is right now. And then in 6 months, when it's really great, it'll never be as bad as it will be in 6 months. And then,
touché.
So I know. I love that idea. And more discoverability means more ears for insider interviews, which I love. So there's some cool tech here at this show. I, for one, got a beacon that helps people discover insider interviews more easily. Any cool tech you've seen?
I am excited that Susan Leland from our team and others are talking about attention metrics.
Oh, yes.
We were on stage with Adelaide Research. They're one of the new attention metric vendors who are really able to tell the story of listening is not just listening. It's not created equally. Some content listeners pay more attention to, and brands should understand that dynamic and how it might influence either the brand messaging, the frequency, the media load, etc.
So Gina, I ask everybody about this, and I know that you think brand purpose, and you got to think NPR if you're thinking content. So that's asked and answered. I want to know about you personally. I mean, how would you define brand purpose? And then do you have some values that you would set out that are your personal brand?
Well, it's interesting. I am so proud to work at NPR, and I wake up every day feeling good about being able to drive revenue to support NPR's journalism. But I've been so lucky in my career. As you recall, I worked at women.com, helped build that, and I consider that part of the democratization of media. Blog Her, the biggest platform for women bloggers, way before influencers became as big as they are. The Discovery Channel back in the days, the highest quality content. So I really feel blessed. I love the brands we work with. I love listening to the CEOs of the companies we work with tell their story as part of their earnings calls. I mean, it's fascinating to me, and we're there rooting for them and helping them reach the people they need to reach.
Okay, and so no swing dancing for you is
not on this trip.
Okay. Gina Garrubbo, President and CEO of NPM. Thank you once again.
Thanks, E.B. This is great
interview. Love
Thanks. Good to see you.
As if having two senior executives that I grabbed at Podcast Movement all in one episode wasn't enough, it wasn't. So you're going to want to listen, subscribe, follow Insider Interviews wherever you like to get your content, because coming up next in a bonus episode, another senior executive from Podcast Movement, it's Jason Hoke. He has the #1 podcast out there right now. It's fascinating conversation, and it's coming out soon. So thank you so much for listening. I welcome your reviews, your sharing, and I also thank John Clayton for the theme music and my friend Jim Mullen for taking a hand at editing this episode. I'm E.B. Moss.